Thank you for joining us on Access Asia. I'm Delano D'Souza. Coming up, the opposition in India calls for Gautam Adani's arrest. It comes after US prosecutors indicted the Indian billionaire for handing out over $250 million in kickbacks. And a court in Hong Kong sentences all 45 defendants in the city's biggest national security case to jail. Terms vary, with the so-called mastermind getting 10 years behind bars. Prosecutors in the United States have indicted Indian billionaire Gautam Adani and 7 others in a bribery scheme. Adani allegedly paid over $250 million in kickbacks to Indian government officials for contracts. The bombshell revelation has wiped off billions of dollars in the group's market value. The Indian opposition, who have long alleged strong links between Adani and the Indian Prime Minister, are now calling for his arrest, and financial authorities in India are mulling if a probe is needed.
It's a bombshell indictment for Gautam Adani. The Indian tycoon has been charged by New York federal prosecutors for his alleged involvement in a bribery scheme worth more than $250 million. He's accused of defrauding investors by using bribes to obtain lucrative solar energy contracts. The fallout hit Adani's business empire immediately as traders rushed to sell off shares.
We have seen the markets have reacted, and all Adani shares are almost 20-25% down, still down. So now it seems to be some serious issue.
According to Forbes, Adani's personal net worth fell by more than $12 billion. The Adani Group is a major player in ports, coal and green energy, among other activities. It is India's biggest port operator and has enjoyed support from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, prompting the country's opposition leader to seize the moment and embroil Modi in the scandal.
The Prime Minister is protecting Mr. Adani, and the Prime Minister is involved in corruption with Mr. Adani. This has been clearly indicated.
The Adani Group has denied the allegations as baseless. Regardless, it is another blow for the group, whose shares fell by around $150 billion last year after a report from short sellers Hindenburg Research accused Adani and his companies of fraud and stock market manipulation.
Western condemnation has been swift after a court in Hong Kong jailed all 45 defendants in the city's biggest national security case. Sentences vary, with the so-called mastermind Benny Tai getting the longest term of 10 years behind bars. The pro-democracy campaigners were found guilty of subversion after they held an informal vote in 2020. The case is the latest example of the chipping away of democratic freedoms in Hong Kong as Beijing continues to exert its influence. For more on this story, we can bring in Kevin Yam, who is a Hong Kong activist and former lawyer who joins us from Melbourne. Thank you so much for speaking to us on the program today. Now, these sentences really demonstrate that Beijing isn't kidding around when it comes to flexing its muscle over Hong Kong. Where does this leave the special administrative region?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this interview. It leaves the special administrative region in a very difficult spot because we have seen an intensifying crackdown in this city, which has affected not just the political and freedoms and democracy and human rights in the city, but it has really shaken business confidence in the special administrative region with all the legal and political uncertainties that have been going on in the last few years.
Now, you yourself are also wanted by authorities in Hong Kong. You have a $130,000 bounty, I believe, on your head. What are they accusing you of?
Well, this is really odd because I returned to Australia after living in Hong Kong for over 20 years in 2022. And since then, I have met with Australian members of parliament, I've met with the Australian foreign minister, and I have testified online before the US Congress. And for that, for things that I did in Australia, as an Australian, exercising my fundamental freedoms in Australia, I was accused of colluding with foreign forces in my Hong Kong advocacy.
Hong Kong had a reputation for being politically vibrant, some would say even messy. Is that simply no longer the case?
Oh, that is definitely no longer the case. They have pretty much locked up all the pro-democracy activists and politicians that have any influence at all over anything. And a lot of us are also now living overseas. So it's certainly the case that they have silenced a lot of opposition.
Do authorities not fear this brain drain? Because the ones who want more would tend to leave, won't they?
Well, you would have thought that if they had an ounce of common sense, that that's what they should be thinking. But it seems like for them, having control and having a sense, and dare I say, a false sense of national security, then that trumps over everything, including the economic or human resources well-being of the city.
Kevin, a couple of months ago, I guest lectured at a university here in Paris, and one of the students was from Hong Kong. And at the end of the session, which we had a debate and everything in the classroom, they came up to me and said, "This doesn't happen in Hong Kong. The teacher comes into the classroom, lectures, we take notes, and we leave, and that's that." Why are authorities scared of debate?
Because for them, they think that debating over anything at all can eventually lead to a challenge to their legitimacy and their power. So they don't really care that a debate over an issue might not be about things that are politically sensitive to them. Just the fact of having debate, just the fact of allowing more free thinking is already going to be threatening to them.
I used to live in Singapore, and I remember that a lot of people always wanted to move to Hong Kong, obviously for the financial services, but also because the city was this great city to be in. Now, Hong Kong seems to have lost its attractiveness. Even tourism numbers are down. Authorities don't seem to care, do they?
I think they do care, but I don't think they're going out of their way to ruin all of that. But it's more that if they had to choose between total control and keeping all of these things that are important, then they would rather have total control. And might I say that it's not just tourists and it's not just business, it's like local Hong Kongers too. You've mentioned a brain drain earlier. And if we think about the sorts of things that Hong Kong has traditionally been good at on the financial side of things, it's things like capital markets listing, it's things like bond listings, it's things like deal making. All of those things are things where you really need proper free flow of information to be able to prosper. And by clamping down on freedoms, with equities analysts now afraid of writing about certain Chinese companies in case they breach a national security law, with prospectuses now not allowed to have sections that criticize the Chinese legal system and the like, you then start imposing a discount on the pricing of everything in Hong Kong. If Hong Kong loses its value as a free city, then the only way to go is for it to become a cheap city.
Very briefly, we saw in a separate case that Hong Kong tycoon Jimmy Lai also took to the stand. His case was delayed. There is this huge backlog of cases in Hong Kong. Do you think authorities could potentially grant some kind of amnesty, or do they want to set an example here?
They can and they should grant some kind of amnesty. In fact, Hong Kong has had precedent for that in a non-political context. I mean, back in the 1970s, Hong Kong had an amnesty for corrupt police officers just so that there can be a clean slate on anti-corruption laws. I don't know why even if they want to clamp down on things, I don't know why they can't do the same in Hong Kong when it comes to something like this. It would, as you say, clear a lot of backlogs. It would also then, for whatever we think about the future lack of freedoms in Hong Kong, at least for businesses, that would create a little bit of certainty and finality, and that everyone can move on.
Kevin Yam, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Now, the Chinese are increasingly reluctant to have kids. The country is dealing with a rapidly aging population. After decades of the one-child policy, the government is now trying to push people to procreate more. However, with the costs of having children on the rise, some have been turning elsewhere, and those with means in China are giving everything they've got to spoiling their pets.
a day out at the shops for the Gao family. But when they talk about spoiling their kids, it's not children that they're referring to, but Seven and Pudding, the married couple's two little dogs.
It suits him.
Not bad.
I like it when it's shorter. Look over here. Oh, Mummy wants to take a photo.
The couple spend about €200 a month on their pets.
The cost of raising a child here is so high, it's really expensive in the big cities, and there's too much pressure.
These animals bring us as much happiness as a child.
With over 110 million cats and dogs in its cities, China is now the biggest market for pets in the world. An entire industry springing up from nothing over the last 15 years. From swimming lessons for animals,
Look over here.
to photography sessions costing from €400 to €1,500, and even special events like group birthday parties. These three dogs are getting presents and cakes. Even the latter has turned into a business, with pastry chefs churning out treats for animals often in their own likeness, costing up to €50.
Pets can't eat just anything. I use a lot of cheese, yogurt and sweet potatoes. The numbers of orders for these cakes are going up 20% every year.
Prominent fashion capital Shanghai even has a special place for cats and dogs in that sector too. Or there's always Doga,
Breathe out.
yoga with your dog.
And with each breath, feel your lungs expand.
The studio might just have to expand. According to one study, there'll be more pets in China than children under 4 by the end of the year.
Downward dog with a dog. That's it for this edition of Access Asia. From all of us on the team, thank you very much for watching.